The night Daniel disappeared. He left three things behind: a half-eaten bowl of pasta on the kitchen counter, his spare toothbrush in the bathroom, and a voicemail he forgot to delete. That voicemail changed my life. I wasn't even supposed to hear it. I only picked up his phone because mine was charging across the room and I wanted to check the weather before our dinner reservation. But the moment I unlocked the screen, the message started playing automatically. A man's voice filled the kitchen. Loud, casual, laughing. "Dude, it's been 2 years. You've earned the 50 grand. Call it. Walk away before this gets messy." I remember standing there, completely still, the pasta slowly going cold, the sound of the refrigerator humming behind me. $50,000. For what? Daniel never came home that night. The dinner reservation passed. Midnight passed. By 2 a.m, I was still sitting on his couch, staring at the door, waiting for an explanation that never came. At 1 a.m, my phone buzzed. One text message. "I'm sorry. Things got complicated. I need space." That was it. 2 years of my life, reduced to a single sentence. At the time, I thought I'd been abandoned. I thought our relationship had simply fallen apart. Painful, yes, but normal. Something people survive every day. But 3 weeks later, a friend named Jess called me with a voice that sounded like she'd been crying. And that's when I learned the truth. 2 years earlier, at a poker night with his wealthy friends, Daniel had made a bet. The rules were simple, cruel, and very expensive. He would choose a woman, me, and make her fall completely in love with him. If he could keep the relationship going for 2 full years, he would win $50,000. And suddenly, every memory I had with him meant something very different. When Jess told me the truth about the bet, I didn't cry. That surprised her. I could hear it in her voice. But the truth is, I had already cried for a week straight before I even knew what I was crying about. By the time she called, something inside me had already hardened into something quieter, something colder, something that felt like the beginning of a decision. Because once you realize you were never loved, only studied, only played like a game, you stop asking why. You start asking a different question. What now? Before Daniel, my life had been predictable. I was 32, working in brand strategy at a consumer goods company. I had spent 8 years climbing carefully, doing good work, presenting thoughtful ideas only to watch promotions go to louder men with less experience. Twice in 3 years, I was passed over for a senior VP role. Each time I told myself the same thing: be patient, work harder, wait your turn. Daniel used to say I was too cautious. He'd smile when he said it, like it was an adorable flaw. I didn't realize back then that he enjoyed my self-doubt. It made things easier for him, easier to stay in control. But the week after Jess's phone call, something shifted. I did 3 things. First, I resigned from my job. Second, I called my older sister and told her everything. She stayed on the phone with me for 4 hours and never once said, "You should have seen this coming." And third, that Tuesday night at 11 p.m., I opened a blank document on my laptop and started writing down every idea I had ever pushed aside because I thought I wasn't ready. 14 pages later, one idea kept circling back. For years I had watched mid-sized lifestyle brands struggle to build real digital communities. Agencies treated them like mini Fortune 500 companies, giving them generic strategies that never worked. But I knew exactly how to fix it. And that night, for the first time in my life, I stopped waiting for permission to try. The first 6 months of starting my company were humbling. When people imagine starting a business, they picture freedom, excitement, big wins. What they don't picture is eating cereal for dinner at midnight while staring at a laptop, wondering if you just made the biggest mistake of your life. I called the company Meridian & Co. Nothing flashy. Just a name that sounded like it knew where it was going. Even when I didn't, there were weeks I doubted everything. Weeks where the silence of working alone felt louder than any busy office I had left behind. And sometimes late at night, I'd hear Daniel's voice in my head. Not cruel. That was the dangerous part. He was always gently skeptical. The kind of skepticism that sounds like kindness, but slowly erodes your confidence. I had to learn to silence that voice. 8 months in, everything changed. I landed my first reel, client to skincare brand from Portland, with a loyal audience but almost no digital engagement. I rebuilt their entire community strategy from scratch. 18 months later, their engaged following had tripled. Their direct-to-consumer revenue jumped 68%. And suddenly referrals started coming in. One brand became 2. 2 became 5. I hired my first employee, Priya, a brilliant 26-year-old, who understood audiences in a way most executives never did. We moved into a real office. Small, but real. With a window that looked out onto a quiet street lined with old oak trees. For the first time in years, my life felt like something I had built with my own hands. And strangely, I almost never thought about Daniel anymore. Until one Friday afternoon, 2.5 years later, when my assistant forwarded me an email. A meeting request. From Callaway Group, one of the biggest brand acquisition firms in the industry. And when I walked into that conference room the following Tuesday morning, I realized something shocking. 3 of the men sitting at the table were the same men who had once bet $50,000 on my heart. When I saw their faces across that conference table, something inside me went very still. Marcus was there. 2 of the other men from that poker night too. The same men who had once watched from a distance while my life became a game worth $50,000. But none of them said a word. Because this time, the rules were different. I opened my presentation and began speaking. For 40 minutes I walked them through everything, how their brands were failing to build real communities, why their engagement was stagnant, and exactly how Meridian & Co. could fix it. I was calm, clear, precise. And if I'm being honest, it was the strongest I had ever been in a professional room. Because in that moment, I realized something important. They might have once bet against me, but now they were sitting in a room asking for my expertise. When the meeting ended, Ethan Callaway, the head of brand strategy, walked me to the elevator. That, he said, was the clearest presentation I've seen in this company in 2 years. 2 months later, Callaway Group offered to acquire Meridian & Co., not to erase it, but to build it into its own division. I kept leadership, creative control, and equity in the company I had built from scratch. The men who once laughed about that bet quietly stepped down from the board weeks before the deal was finalized. No explanation. Just gone. Daniel called me the night before the signing. I recognized his voice instantly. "You're going to be extraordinary," he said quietly. I thought about everything that had happened, the voicemail, the bet, the years it took me to rebuild myself. "You made it harder than it needed to be," I told him. And then I hung up. The truth is, my life wasn't built because of what he did. It was built because I finally stopped waiting for permission to become the person I already was. And once you learn to stand on your own, you never go back to leaning